100%.
And we'll ask her what's wrong with Keir Starmer, you know, after laying those flowers in Southport.
A party.
And then hot-footed it back to Downing Street for a celebrity party. I mean, what's wrong with this guy? He's just not normal. I want to ask him, Keir, speaking as an outsider, what do you think of the human race? I mean, you know, he really is strange.
It worried me that is... Well, look, that attests to his character and his judgment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that he's not going to escape that lightly and people won't forget it. Look, make sure you tune in to the great Kevin O'Sullivan. Follow me next here on Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in to the home of common sense. I'm delighted to be with you. Get your calls into Kevin now, 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
There you are. Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Talk all the way to 10 o'clock. I am Kevin O'Sullivan. I'm your host and I'll be with you for the next 3 hours of news, views and topical debate. I value your input, you know that, so get involved. Get it off your chest and get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000. There's lots to talk about tonight and as you also know, it's good to talk on Talk. It's Friday, the weekend starts now, but here's what's coming up. With the nation still in a state of shock after the harrowing details of the Southport murders were revealed in all their horror, calls are growing for the return of the death penalty. Is anything really achieved by sending a semi-human lunatic like Axel Rudakabana to jail for half a century? Wouldn't it be preferable if we could have put that little bastard out of our misery? Surely in exceptional cases like the dancehall slaughter of the innocents, the British justice system should have had the option of execution. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Or is the death sentence, as critics maintain, state-sponsored savagery? 0344 499 1000. We didn't officially abolish hanging until 1998, but the last criminals to swing were Peter Allen and Gwyn Evans for the murder of John Allen West. Those two went to the gallows on August the 13th, 1964. Is it time to restore the ultimate punishment. 03444991000. In other news, serious doubts have been cast over Keir Starmer's membership of the human race after it emerged that straight after laying flowers for the victims in Southport, the Prime Minister wiped the sombre look from his wide, flat face and hot-footed it back to Downing Street to host a fun-packed, star-studded party to celebrate winning the election. A lovely time was had by all with a delicious barbecue fired up in the number 10 garden. What is wrong with this guy? Why is he so weird? 03444991000. Meanwhile, our dear leader continues apace with his obsessional mission to betray Brexit. Now two-tier is refusing to rule out Britain joining an EU customs deal, and the Brussels gang have made it clear that they'd welcome the UK back into their sclerotic club. Why does Starmer and his cabinet cronies always look to the doom, gloom and economic decline across the Channel and not to the money and prosperity across the Atlantic, where America is booming? Will Labour's EU fixation cost us an American trade deal? I'm warning you right now, it's on course to do that. 03444991000. Later, in an hour or so, we'll be joined by former Met Detective Mike Neville to discuss the state of British policing. And let's face it, it really is in a state. And I'll bring you the latest in the Sarah Sharif case after the appeal court finally ruled that the three judges who made the disastrous decisions that essentially allow that poor little girl's fiend of a father to torture her to death can now be named. A serious slapdown for Mr. Justice Williams, who ruled that the bungling beaks must remain anonymous to protect them from the social media lynch mob and journalists who he said could not be trusted to be responsible. Judicial overreach in all its lack of glory. Who the hell does this guy think he is? He should be seriously reprimanded. All that and so much more, so don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Friday night together. And for the next couple of hours, I'll be in the studio with my Friday friend, Pete Barnes. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks for having me, Kev.
Political strategist, of course, Tory fanatic.
The truth fanatic. Thank you very much. The truth.
But before we talk to the Tory fanatic, let's go over to a man who I would say has got the zeitgeist right now. He is the chairman of Reform UK, Zia Yousaf. Zia, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Well, what a day for you. There are obviously a lot of issues to talk about, but Reform UK are now officially the most popular party in the country, overtaking not only the Tories but also Labour now. This poll came out today, so congratulations. Your thoughts?
Well, thank you, but the credit and the thanks are due to the hundreds of thousands of members we have across the country and the millions of patriotic British people who support Reform. And the reason this is happening is because what Reform are doing, what Nigel Farage and our MPs are doing, is giving the British people hope at, frankly, an extraordinarily dark time. And so we're very proud of that. One of the things we saw, I was out in the United States over the inauguration weekend for President Donald Trump, and I can tell you that the spirit of boldness, of confidence, was something to behold. It really felt like, once again, the United States is walking tall. We're all inspired by that. You look at this whirlwind, this shock and awe campaign of executive orders that he has initiated since coming to power. What a remarkable thing it is to see a politician, a candidate, make bold promises and then deliver on them so quickly. That is exactly what the British people can expect and will get when Prime Minister Farage arrives at number 10 Downing Street, flanked by 350 to 400 Reform members of Parliament who are courageous and are in no uncertain terms as to why they got elected.
Well, what I would say is that, of course, you're quite right. I mean, Donald Trump does optimism brilliantly. I mean, the reason that America is booming, the reason that investment is already pouring in and their economy is soaring is in no small part due to his rhetoric, talking up his country, saying America is great, make America great again, America will be great again, the American dream is back. Meanwhile, we have a government who came into power on July the 5th and ever since have been talking us down, talking this country down. In what way did Keir Starmer and his motley cabinet crew think that that doom, gloom and pessimism was going to work for the people of Britain? It's no wonder they're falling down the charts.
Well, look, I understand what you're saying. This is a disastrous, frankly, dystopian Keir Starmer government full of a bunch of, his cabinet are a bunch of over-promoted student politicians who have no business running anything, let alone a great country like this. But look, whether it's 0.1% growth or 0.1% negative, doesn't really matter. This country has not been growing now for a number of years. Real wages for British people, that is wages, the take-home pay net of not just taxes but of inflation, has been trending down for almost 15 years in this country. That's why your listeners and your viewers feel poorer. It's because you actually are getting poorer. And the people who are actually responsible for that are the Tory party, who took the tax burden to the highest level that it has been since World War II, exploded the size of the population by about 6.5 million people during their 14 years in office. That's a net growth in population number. Failed to build anything like enough infrastructure, not enough hospitals, so you can't get to see A&E in the case of tens of thousands of people in a sensible time frame. Not enough prisons, which is why we have so many violent criminals still terrorising British people. So look, whether it's Labour or the Tories, these are a bunch of weak-kneed, supine, cowardly people who have no business, frankly, representing the British people. And now with reform and under Nigel Farage's leadership, we have real hope for patriotic, highly competent leadership.
Just to provide the details to the audience, this poll was done by an organisation called Find Out Now, a pollster company, and the figures are now Labour are on 22%, and until recently, until this poll, they were incredibly, in my view, still just about top of the charts, still the most popular party in the country. They've now fallen to third place on 22%. The Tories have gone above them on 23%. Not sure I can work out why that has happened. But you guys at Reform are top on 26%. And can I say, Zia, that my take on it is that you guys and Nigel Farage, Richard Tice and your small number of MPs, for some reason seem to manage to make so much more noise than any other party, but particularly the Tories. The Tories are supposed to be the opposition. What did we hear from Kemi Badenoch this week? On this week of all weeks, so much going on in so many ways. She says it would be very sad. She's very sad about academy schools, that taking away their independence will be a tragedy. I kind of tend to agree with that, but is that the best she could do this week? And can I bring you now to the issue of the day now, which again, I think Reform UK have grasped the nettle here and caught the mood of the public. We're talking, of course, about the Southport horror, the horror on the dance floor, the awful little person, Axel Rudakabana. Now, my view on it, I've never had strong feelings about the death penalty, but I look at the faces of those three little girls whose lives were snuffed out in the most horrific way. And I think, well, surely in exceptional circumstances, the British justice system, the British state should have the option of execution. Rupert Lowe said this, Richard Tice has said this. Can you articulate the feelings of your party and what your party's policy would be on this?
Well, I want to be really clear about something. I am concerned that this discussion, as important as it is, and obviously the transcripts and learning in detail the horrific aspects of this case, it broke my heart, as I'm sure it did for your viewers. But let's be really clear about something. It is the job of the government to keep people like those lovely little girls safe. And there were people who are being paid by the taxpayer. For example, the people involved in the Prevent programme who catastrophically and devastatingly failed in their duty, not just to do their jobs, but their moral duty to keep those people safe. He was reported to prevent multiple times. Likewise, a Crown prosecutor. How on earth somebody who possessed enough ricin to kill thousands of people was never charged with terrorism? The fact that our government withheld and covered up so much information about this case. I mean, there are plenty of parallels throughout British history where the British public learnt lots of details about the killer, but it was a different sort of profile. It was different immutable characteristics. It didn't fit the narrative. These are all really important questions. It's why Nigel Farage, our leader, has called for the resignation of the head of the Crown Prosecution Service. It is evident that we have two-tier policing in this country. We have two-tier justice systems. We have a prevent service that has failed catastrophically. This killer should never have been allowed to carry out these murders, and we must not let off the hook the people whose duty it was to protect those little girls.
And what about Nigel Farage here at the time, that summer of discontent after these horrific killings when riots broke out all over the country, particularly in Southport? He suggested, he said that, that there was information available that made it fairly clear that something was not right here, that there may be terrorism involved, that perhaps it was a migrant and that the government were covering up. He was slapped down as some sort of rabble-rouser dealing in misinformation, particularly by the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, who said that any suggestion of terrorism was fake news. Now, Nigel has written to Angela Rayner demanding an apology, but he is owed an apology by Keir Starmer as well. The only real misinformation that was being spread at that time was by Keir Starmer and his cabinet cronies, who told us all, how dare you gossip and speculate about terrorism. There is no terrorism here. Well, guess what? There was. I mean, this cover-up that he's trying to get around now was scandalous. It's a scandal. He lied to the British people.
I'm glad you used that word. I was about to very respectfully correct you on the word misinformation. This is not misinformation. It was premeditated, deliberate lies. The idea that the Prime Minister of this country would not have known about the ricin, the idea that the Prime Minister of this country, and actually obviously the Deputy Prime Minister, would have not known about the fact that he had downloaded Al-Qaeda materials. He would have been aware of these things. So they deliberately lied. And as someone who works with Nigel Farage, I'll tell you, it was a very challenging time because if you remember, there was the mother of all smear campaigns. You remember the whole hashtag Farage riots thing that was going on. Frankly, very dangerous rhetoric, the notion that our leader, Nigel, in any way provoked any of that stuff. The reality is what caused so much anger to boil over was this sense that something was being covered up. That has now transpired to be obviously true. And what Nigel Farage did, he was the only political leader in this country brave enough to simply ask the correct and valid questions. For example, is information being withheld from us? Clearly, a very significant amount of vital information was withheld from us, and the government's own anti-terrorism czar, if you remember, just a few weeks later, said that that was correct and that withholding information from the British public is an awful thing to do because you leave a vacuum that then gets filled by potentially actual misinformation. So none of this is appropriate at all. Angela Rayner absolutely should apologise to Nigel Farage. Keir Starmer should apologise. I mean, frankly, let's be real, this is a resignation matter. At some point, we hope to be able to hold Keir Starmer truly to account for his devastating and appalling actions.
Yeah, I didn't say that lightly. I don't say that lightly, but the Prime Minister lied to the people of this country. He may have had his reasons. He wanted to quell those riots, but he still lied to us. So can I just finish, Zia, if I can, with a few potential policies for the Reform UK party in terms of Southport, developments that have kind of unfolded since yesterday. Would the Reform UK party be in favour of a return to the death penalty, as I say, in very exceptional circumstances? Would the Reform UK party agree with a great many of our viewers and listeners that people like Axel Rudiger should no longer have the option not to face their sentencing and not to have to listen to the victim's statements. And if they refuse, the state should show its might and force them into the dock, if necessary, in a straitjacket, gagged. But you listen to this, you take your punishment. And finally, would Reform UK support a change in this blanket rule about people under 18 not being able to get a full life sentence, a whole life sentence? What I thought about that, what I think is strange about the fact that the judge, who I think under the circumstances did the best job that he could, he was clearly frustrated that he couldn't impose an even more severe punishment than 52 years. But what I found strange was back when he was first arrested, there were a few days when we weren't told his identification, his name, because he was under 18. And the law of this land is we don't reveal the name of suspects if they're under 18. And then a judge said, well, you know what? This is such an exceptional circumstance, and he's very near his 18th birthday. You can name him. So they changed the rules then. Why couldn't they change the rules for the sentence as well? Make exceptions, as I say. Shouldn't judges be able to make exceptions in exceptional cases? You'll get a crime like this once in a lifetime, and I feel to an extent the state didn't have the apparatus to deal with it severely enough.
Yeah, well, look, I have a great deal of sympathy for all of those sentiments that you expect, that you just articulated. Look, Reform UK is a serious political party. We're now polling at #1 in this country, and we expect to be the next party of government of the United Kingdom. So I'm not going to make up policy on the Hoof Live on your show, as much as I love your show. But I will say this. I want to reiterate, as shocking as having to witness everything you just described was, we should be ensuring that such things never, ever get to happen again.
Yeah.
This man is a psychopath. He actually said he was glad that these little girls died. It was why this stuff was so shocking. I go back to the point that there are people in the Prevent program who knew about these issues. The father knew about these issues, and nothing was done about it. He was allowed, frankly, to go and commit this murder. And then there's some narrative warfare about it being about Amazon and, purchasing knives or something like that. What a
lot of nonsense that was.
It's absolute nonsense. So I want to reiterate the point that we have an intelligence service, we have the Prevent program that has been totally unfit for purpose for a very long time. And look, this has real life consequences. It has tragic consequences. People lose their lives as a result. I mean, do you remember? I'm sure some of your listeners and viewers will remember the Manchester Arena bombing at the Ariana Grande concert, another tragic terrorist attack. And if you remember, there was a security guard who gave testimony and said that he saw the bomber walking into the arena and he was about to go and stop them, but he didn't because he was worried that he would be called racist and classed racist. Right, so this is endemic in our society. We have two-tier policing, we have special treatment for certain groups, and that does nobody any favors, even if it is well-intended, which maybe in some cases it is, maybe in some cases it isn't. No matter how it's intended, it has tragic consequences. And we go back to that point at Reform UK. We will ensure that we have an intelligence agency that does its job, is not afraid to do its job. Our police are not afraid to do their jobs, and that will save lives. Until Reform are in power, I'm afraid we're going to continue to get this sort of appalling malfeasance, I would say, in public office.
I fear you might be right, Zia. Zia, great pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for your time. Zia Yousaf, the chairman of Reform UK. We'll go straight to break now and discuss some of what he said and deal with more of the ramifications of the horror in Southport after these messages. Stay tuned.
priorities of the Starmer government in foreign policy has been getting closer ties with Europe. They see it for two reasons. Number one, economic growth. They think that all the indicators suggest that if we have closer ties with Europe, that will improve our economic chances. Looking at some of the red tape, removing that's affected businesses. And second of all, because they also want to have a good relationship with Europe, because they want to work together on a range of different areas, not just trade, of course.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, we ran over a bit then, but it was good to talk to Zia Youssef, the chairman of the Reform UK party. I mean, never mind the polls. Me and Pete had a massive row. If any of you were tuning in last week, we had a massive row about Reform UK won't make it and the Tories are better and all that. Let's park that this week.
Yeah.
You know, as you say, polls come and go, but I mean, this will be what always happens, isn't it? The parties that don't do well in the polls, you can't pay any attention to the polls. The parties that are top always go, this is very significant, you know. That's the way it goes. But I think it is quite significant. I mean, there's no doubting that Reform UK are doing well. What did you think about some of the things that Zia Youssef was saying? I mean, he's a good operator, he's a good talker, very diplomatic, very careful, but he was glossing over the fact that actually Reform UK today have very much grasped the nettle about the death penalty. Rupert Lowe saying bring it back, Richard Tice saying bring it back. You know, they're good at catching the mood of the people. Everybody in the country, or many people, I've got a switchboard full of people right now saying bring it back. So you know, what do you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, Zia is an incredible communicator and probably one of the smartest people, and I tell you right now, if he was in charge, they'd be 10 points ahead by now. He is an absolutely incredible political weather vane, I have to admit. But you are right that when it comes to this issue of the death penalty, Reform have grasped it, and unfortunately, I think the nettle might be about to sting. This country has teetered very carefully with the death penalty argument for quite some time. I am a staunch anti-death penalty supporter. However, I get the kind of the fervour and the kind of the need for the state to do more, given the severity of what we've seen in Southport. You know, when a kid has 122 knife wounds, you have to question what can we do? And more importantly, I think this is the most important thing. How did this happen? Given everything.
It's a shambles.
It's an embarrassment. It's an absolute embarrassment.
And do you know what Zia was just saying then? He's absolutely right. Much of the appalling mistakes, many of the appalling mistakes made in this guy's long history. He was caught 10 times with a knife. He actually told Prevent assessors that he would like to massacre school children. He actually told them, and they said, yeah, well, you know, that's one thing, but you don't qualify for Prevent, our anti-terrorism scheme. Why not? I mean, Prevent, it transpires very hard to get into.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah.
So, yes, mistake. The police, Merseyside police, still saying it wasn't terrorism. Yes, it was.
No.
It was.
Even Justice Goose, the judge in this case, has said, the argument over terrorism, whether it is or it isn't, is a rather irrelevant. It is the severity of the crime. I think he called it an act of pure evil, and nobody could
Yeah, but that's
could dispute this, but it's not. Terrorism is a very, very specific thing.
Well, why?
Because there is no.
Why?
Because
stop it being such a specific thing.
You have to have elevations of crime.
Rubbish.
Terrorism is to change. There is no religious motivation. There is no political
this
motivation.
This is
and
wrong.
there is no. This is what is right. Is because the law has to be specific. Because the law is there to protect us, and the law is there to punish those wrongdoing.
Well, isn't it?
And this is why we have to have the inquiry, and this is why we have to do the right thing. We shouldn't look away because it is difficult, but we shouldn't jump in with 2 feet because we are we're jumping with emotions and not our brains. This is my big fear about what we're going to happen.
We've got to go to break, but just to say that when someone is caught with an Al-Qaeda training manual written by an Islamic extremist, I say it's a fair chance he's a terrorist. So why are we messing around with stupid little definitions? And in terms of the shambles and all the mistakes that were made in the run-up to this horror in Southport, many of them were made by hand-wringing middle-class people who are terrified of criticising people of colour, potential Muslims, Islamic people. It is all about that. They're terrified of being called racist. They're terrified of being called Islamophobic, and that is what we have to rid our society of, because we are never going to confront the dangers that these people present to us unless we get real. And when we have someone like Axel Rudy Obama, what on earth are we doing? So, oh no, I don't think it was technically, because technically he wasn't actually adherent to any ideology, you see. So that means, hang on, I just looked there, it says page 35 in my legal book, that's not terrorism. Of course it was terrorism. 03444991000. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We're going to talk about weirdo Starmer in just a second, but I just want to pick Pete Barnes up on one point. Right, I respect your views about whether or not Axel Rudy Obama was a terrorist. I say he was. I believe he was an Islamic terrorist as well. I believe he was radicalised by the thoughts and the ambitions of Islamist extremists. By the way, these are extremists. We're not having a go at all of Islam or all Muslims, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, so you say, oh, well, technically, you can't just say he was a terrorist. And, of course, all of our hand-wringing MPs were desperate not to say it, because they might be accused of racism or Islamophobia. We can't have that. That Welsh guy, right, a few years back, who watched that BBC drama, Three Girls, which was about the rape gangs in Rochdale. The grooming gangs, as we euphemistically call them. Yeah. I'm glad people are dropping grooming gangs. Rape gangs, that's what they were. Paedophile rape gangs, let's get that straight. He watched that drama, very good it was too, got in his van, drove up the M4 to Finsbury Park, to the mosque there, and drove into all the Muslim worshippers there and killed one person, injured a few more. He was immediately called a terrorist. He didn't have any ideology, he just watched a programme, a drama on the BBC that annoyed him. Why are we able to call him a terrorist but not Axel Ruda Kabami?
Because it was motivated by religion. That's the point. It's the motivations behind the act that define it as a terrorist event.
No, it wasn't.
No, but he was. Because he didn't drive it into a mosque.
No,
he didn't drive it into a temple.
No, it wasn't. It was motivated by a BBC drama.
No, it wasn't. But what was the drama about? That is the point.
Well, what was the Al-Qaeda manual about?
Because it was exactly how you make it. There is no other evidence available to the courts that was presented that shows it had anything to do with Al-Qaeda or Islamic terrorism.
Right,
if we're going to talk about
Get out of the studio. Honestly, this lunatic I have in every Friday. Nice try, Pete, but you lose. Let's talk about something, a rare issue we can agree on. Keir Starmer.
Oh, God.
Keir Starmer. I mean, is he a member of the human race or not? No. So, we all remember, just after the horror in Southport, quite rightly, him and I think it was Yvette Cooper, but he went to Southport and laid flowers as a tribute to those poor little girls who were killed and, of course, the poor little girls who were injured. By the way, talking about those testimonies, did you see that one of the little girls was so bad, I think she was one of the survivors, was so badly injured that her dad couldn't recognise
Yeah.
I mean, this is the sort of, just this awful details that are emerging now, and that's why the nation is in a state of shock, and that's why many people are saying, you know what, bring back the death penalty. It doesn't have to be hanging, by the way. I don't know why. I'm going off piste again now, as is my wont. I've always had dogs. I've taken dogs to the vet and it's the saddest thing you ever do. Breaks your heart. But they put this injection thing, a little catheter thing in, and they inject, and they just gently slip away. It's the most gentle thing you've ever seen. It's tragic and sad. But there is no pain, nothing. Why don't we if we have the death penalty, why do we have to make a sort of grim spectacle of it? Why don't we do that? But anyway, I'm just putting that out there. Anyway, let's talk about Starmer. So he goes up to Southport, lays those flowers, and if you remember, somebody heckled him.
There was more than one.
And they were heckling him, and he couldn't respond. No. He can't think on his feet. Can't think, I don't think, let alone on his feet. There he is. Right, so no, it's Lisa Nandy that is there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, good for him, did the right thing there. After that, he wiped his sombre face off, that big old flat, wide face of him. He wiped that off, and then he, zoomed down to Downing Street, where he hosted a celebrity party to celebrate Labour's victory in the general election. There was a barbecue out the back, the star-studded event. There he was, champagne flowing, delicious food. No proper politician. Well, no proper human being would do that. What is wrong with this guy?
I honestly don't have an answer to that, because I tell you now, I watched that wreath laying and I thought, this doesn't feel right. The heckling, the comments that were made, they don't normally happen at these events, not British ones. And I just felt something was off. It turns out that Starmer spent, 5 or 10 minutes with the families afterwards. He went to meet community leaders, well, still a phrase I've yet to understand in this this country.
Yeah,
What
hate
is a community leader?
Yeah,
I
they're
swear to
always
God.
self-appointed, aren't they?
Always. And they're probably like a resident busybody, most of them. But yeah, then he shoots back down to London for his a victory party. I could understand it if it was a charity thing and it had been on the books for a while and it was involving other things. I could vaguely understand that. However, this was to give themselves a pat on the back. That is the most disgusting bit about this. This was to give themselves a pat on the back for winning the general election. Now, yeah, maybe have that party. But given that event, given the horrific nature of it, given the fact that those prime ministers should still have been working that day, you know, given the severity, and if given all this ricin and all these terrorism things that everybody's running around talking about now, you know, what was he doing? What on earth was going through his brain? This is to show as a prime minister that yet again is tone deaf and has no understanding of people. This is where Starmer falls down time after time after time.
Exactly right.
He doesn't understand people.
Doesn't talk human.
He understands spreadsheets, not empathy.
So right.
And he looks at this. Look at it from winter fuel allowance to the farmers to what we're going to see in the softening on the Nomdon tax status stuff. He doesn't get people, and this has got to be the Labour Party's big downfall if they don't buck in and they start to try to, you know, understand their fellow man. Starmer has a real blind spot here, and he's not being advised well, or more interestingly, he's not listening to the advice he's been given.
He's either getting terrible advice or he's not listening to the advice, decent advice. Either way, I mean, this is the worst look imaginable. And of course, among the revellers at number 10 Downing Street was Labour's Dr. Feelgood donor of money and free gear, Lord Wahid Ali, Michelle Collins, the soap actress, was there. Not soap, actress. She's good. I like her, Michelle. She's a friend of mine. Very good actress she is too. Animal lover. Campaign. Why am I saying this? Campaigns tirelessly for animal welfare.
My favourite thing, though, was Downing Street was so on the ball to say Lord Ali did not organise the party, but he was merely in attendance. They stressed that so hard. And it was like, you have missed the point.
This guy, I think it's worrying, as you say. He doesn't speak human. He doesn't seem to understand the human race. He's a weird automaton, a technocrat.
Yes.
Everything is by the book. Everything is what he read in his legal manuals, and that's a concern.
Yeah.
A prime minister who doesn't. It's not just that he doesn't understand his people, the British people. He doesn't understand people. As I say, you know, I'd like to ask him. Hey, Keir, speaking as an outsider, what do you think of the human race?
Yeah, I think you're right there. He doesn't have what we call the feel. And what we mean by that is, does he kind of grasp the political culture? Does he grasp the zeitgeist? Does he really understand how the country is feeling? You know, and it comes through in many, many ways. But the main example is when he gives these big speeches as Prime Minister, and he just sounds flat. He doesn't have the Prime Minister voice. Do you know, where he speaks for the nation, on behalf of the nation, and in times of success and in times of sorrow. Starmer falls down epically on this count. You know, it's a big test for a Prime Minister. It's a big test for any politician to see whether they can take that step up into any major leadership role.
Absolutely.
And I tell you now, Starmer has missed the mark on this.
His speech this week in the middle of the week was absolutely dire.
It was awful.
He didn't get that right.
No.
And you think about politics, it's in showbiz they have a saying, once you can fake sincerity, you've got it made. Well, now, politicians, they might not actually be the most empathetic people in the world, but they better know about empathy, and they better know how to portray an empathetic look. Tony Blair was very good at that. David Cameron was good at that. And, it's all about understanding people, understanding the emotions of people. I don't think he understood the way the nation was feeling this week.
No, I really don't. And I think what's more interesting is, why did those who knew about what had happened continue to attend as well? Yeah. Why didn't they say, well, wait a minute, this isn't a good idea, I'm not going to go to that? I think this speaks of a Labour Party that is so detached from reality and from, you know, again, it's common man, that it just lives in its own little world, and he thinks that what it can do is that every criticism of it is just, that's just this, that's just the far right people.
Well,
he's just trying batting people away, when actually what people really want is some human emotion from them.
What he does when he is confronted with something he doesn't like, a point that puts him on the spot, he pretends it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So he said this, yes, I did know about the terrorism element to this, because he was charged with possession of material likely to be useful to someone planning a terrorist attack. So there was a terrorism element to it. He said there wasn't at the time. And he said that the reason he did this cover-up, he didn't use that exact phrase, was because he'd been advised that it could prejudice the trial.
That's nonsense.
Absolute rubbish. And when people say, but Keir, you're a lawyer, doesn't make any legal sense. It just goes, and just moves on to the next point. It's like when he was confronted with two-tier policing. There clearly is two-tier policing. He just went, that's not an issue, and walked off.
Yeah, definitely.
It is an issue, and you're the Prime Minister, and you should confront it. If people are concerned by this, you just pretending, go, la, 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 this problem doesn't exist. That's not good enough. You're the damn Prime Minister. Do your job properly. And by the way, I'll send you the application form. See if you can join the human race. We'll have a look at it, but I don't think you qualify so far. Anyway, next up, we'll talk more about this, and we will talk a little bit about that ever-present nightmare, the migrant crisis. That next. Stay tuned.
And what we need to actually now address is how on earth it happened when so many, what we're starting to learn now, and obviously I can't speak, so I have the full facts have not yet come to surface, but how when so many agencies were involved, did not one person take action to actually intervene and stop this person being able to even be in a position to enter that building. There are no excuses at all for what this person did. It is absolutely nothing but pure evil.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We'll have a little chat about the migrant crisis in a minute. But first of all, Pete, here we go again. Here we go. Starmer has refused to rule out joining an EU customs deal, and the Brussels trade chief says that the UK becoming a member of the good organisation, the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention is, and I quote, something we could consider. So what I'd like to say about this is, why does Starmer and his bunch of socialist cronies, the cabinet, why do they constantly look across the channel for trade deals for our economic future? Because across the channel is a sclerotic old organisation that is disintegrating, to be honest with you, and is the very symbol of economic decline, doom, gloom and social dystopia, really. They never look across the Atlantic where, America is booming. Over in America, across the Atlantic, there is money, there is prosperity, there's a golden future for the States, and there could be for us if only we looked in the right direction, but we're looking at doom and gloom and Brussels. Yeah. This is a disaster.
Oh, it is a disaster of epic proportions, not to mention yet again, another big betrayal of Brexit. But I think, to answer your question, I would say it's because their way of thinking is always, wanting more is bad, wanting better is bad, and it is that kind of, we must somehow pay for our history and pay for the choices that we make, and growth is a bad word, and all this kind of stuff that is to diminish us and to make us small, because when we are small, that means we need other people, and they don't like the idea of a great Britain, and it is driven into them. It's somehow in their DNA. I don't really know how, but you always get the sense that they just don't like this country. They don't like the fact that people want to do better. You should be happy with what you've got, and this is
why they don't like America.
Yes, exactly. But the land of the free and the land of opportunity. That is why
the
they
land
don't.
of profits.
Yes,
they find business distasteful.
Yes,
they don't like it. Their only really interest in business is to bleed it dry, to milk the private sector. Yeah. Massive taxes and private citizens, like, for example, me. I don't want to talk about my current tax bill because I'll say things on air that you really shouldn't say on air, just to say it's gargantuan. So they take our money, private citizens and private industry, and they tax us to the hilt, and they give that money to the public sector. That is a recipe for economic doom.
Oh, 100%. And pretty much every economist will tell you that. And yet the Labour Party have driven home with it. And you wonder why Rachel Reeves was giving a speech at Davos to about 14 people turned up to it? Yeah. It was an embarrassment. Everyone keeps saying what a week she's had. I'm like, what week? What she's announced a couple of things, and it's interesting with the net zero and growth stuff, but I believe it when I see it. Thank you very much. That is my problem with the Labour Party, right? And they say whatever they want, but I'll believe it when I see it. But this is kind of a situation with the EU now, and they keep calling it the reset. It's not reset, it's realignment. This is membership and everything but name. But it's interesting. They're calling it bridge building. But what is this slow erosion? Because if we look at, say, things like the youth movement program that they wanted to have for students to come here, isn't that funny how that's very similar to freedom of movement? They've got this that is very similar to the customs union. It is yet again just chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. They get to say, though, we didn't cross our red lines, but yet the reality is, the realpolitik is that they are pushing us further and further into the European Union, so that at the next Parliament or whatever a referendum comes, we all
the road to the sunlit uplands, the uphill road to prosperity, is across the Atlantic. We should be sucking up to Trump and his gang. Instead, the road to doom, gloom and decline is across the Channel. And we're looking that way, and they kind of like that because, the EU is very sort of socialist, very left-wing, and not very business inclined. It's all to do with culture and social aspects. That's all they're interested in. They're not very interested in business, and that suits our lot to the ground. They basically don't like business.
No, they don't. They, like you said, they consider it a dirty word. They don't really get it, and it's probably because most of them have never worked in business. I think that's that's what really shows, is that those people who have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, that kind of wanting more, wanting to do better, to do for themselves or for the family or for whoever, you know, those people have drive and passion, and they tend to flourish in capitalist societies. Unfortunately, we're now being led by people who think that paper pushing is a job, and that that's, like you said, it's doom and gloom, and I'll challenge you tax bill to tax bill.
Yeah, exactly. No. Mine is huge. I might not win all of our arguments. I'd win that one, I'll tell you. Yes, it's a disaster. It is a disaster. You know, by the way, the socialist BBC, you know, it didn't have a business department or a business editor till about 1996.
That's obscene, isn't it?
They finally got a guy called Jeff Randall. But before that, they never had a business department. They never had a bit, because business, who cares? Beneath
why would anybody need to know about business?
The BBC still takes that attitude, by the way. Before we get to the news, very quickly, I wanted to highlight this. I think it's worth talking about. I'm sure, like me and most of the residents of this country, you were shocked, Pete, by that statistic yesterday that emerged from, of all companies, Thames Water revealed that 1 in every 12 London residents is an illegal migrant. 1 in 12 Londoners are illegal. And the full travesty of two-tier Keir's knee-jerk abandoning of the Rwanda scheme is still emerging. So Yvette Cooper, she says the Tories spent £715 million preparing to deport asylum seekers to Kigali, the Rwandan capital. It's now just emerged, this has just been revealed, that £134 million of that was wasted on computer IT systems that were never, ever used. Now, the point about this is, I know that Starmer didn't like the Rwandan scheme. A lot of people didn't. A lot of people said, well, it failed. Well, how do you know it didn't start? He abandoned that on day one, and I think it was the height of irresponsibility. You can't say, oh, they spent £715 million on that. I don't even want to look at it. I mean, once that amount of money, of taxpayers' money, has been spent, they should have looked at it at the very least. And they should have said, blimey, £134 million on an IT system. But no, he just abandoned it, and now we've got no deterrent. We wasted £715 million, and the government is doing absolutely nothing to stop this escalating crisis that has led to 1 in every 12 Londoners being an illegal. By the way, that comes to about 700,000 or 800,000 people.
I know. I just don't have words for this. I actually don't have anything to kind of form a sentence, because it's the second largest amount of money. The biggest was 290, which went to Kigali, to the Rwandan government to actually do the scheme in the first place. But what really got me was Yvette Cooper said it was the most shocking waste of taxpayer money she's ever seen. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Well, it was when you chucked it all down the drain.
Because all this had to do was one boat. Turn it round, sort it out, deport, one flight. That's it. One flight. Because it showed that we meant business.
A boat all the way to Rwanda. That would have taken months.
Sorry, a flight. Yeah, I mean, I don't care. A dinghy, we'll put them on it. We'll send them back.
You like small boats? Row to Kigali.
But this is what's so important, is that it shows that, yet again, the government was more interested in being seen to be doing something than actually doing something that mattered.
That's a very good point, that, Pete. You know, they talk about a waste of taxpayers' money. Well, it wasn't a waste of taxpayers' money until that day one of the Labour government, and Keir Starmer just said, go, it's all. Yeah. They are the ones that wasted the money. And by the way, that left us with no deterrent. And guess what? They're coming over at a rate of hundreds came over this week.
Yeah, they did.
They're still coming. They're still coming. And our government is going to smash the gangs, smash the gangs. How many gangs have they smashed so far? I know none.
No, they've had one guy.
They haven't
one. I don't think he was successfully prosecuted.
Nothing to do with the Border Security Command.
Utterly pathetic.
By the way, the Border Security Command, which has a £200,000 a year commander, a guy by the name of Martin Hewitt, that has been supplied by this government with £175 million worth of high-tech equipment to catch the gangs. As I always say, till I'm blue in the face, you can smash as many people smuggling gangs as you like. Tomorrow, there'll be new people smuggling gangs, because what you have to do is don't worry about the gangs, stop the migrants. Once there are no migrants coming, of course there won't be any people smuggling gangs, because they'll be out of business. That's how you do it. This lot are doing it arse about face, to be honest with you, to say the least. But actually, they're doing absolutely nothing. And that, folks, is an utter disgrace. Let me know what you think. 03444991000. After the break, after the 8 o'clock news, we'll be joined by former Met Police Detective Mike Neville. We're going to talk about the state of the police. And as I said earlier, let's face it, they're in one hell of a state. That next, stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home.
Welcome back. Well, for the next sort of 20-25 minutes or so, we're going to be joined by former Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville, old friend of the show. Always good to have him on board, especially tonight, Mike. Welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, well, thanks. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure. Well, look, I wanted to just talk to you really about the state of the British police, the state of British policing, which, as I say, I do think is in a bit of a state. Let's focus in on Southport. You know, the Merseyside police chief, Serena Kennedy, who was in charge at the time, she's now like passing the buck, saying, well, the reason we didn't tell you any of the truth about Axel Rudikabana was we were advised not to by the Crown Prosecution Service. You know, I mean, to an extent, I'll take her word for it. But I just think she pitched in with the CPS, with the Prime Minister, and their big mission was to keep the public in the dark about the terrorist element and to just make sure that all we thought were that those people rioting in Southport and other cities were just far-right thugs on a trail of destruction for no particular reason, and that when they shouted about a terrorist link. This guy was a terrorist, maybe a migrant. They said that was absolutely not true and it was disgraceful misinformation. The police were a part of this cover-up, whatever she says, weren't they?
I absolutely agree, and I don't know why they didn't challenge the CPS there. And what sums up the real how they've dealt with this is the photograph that they released. Everybody else who's been charged, when they release a photograph, they release the mugshot, which are taken on arrest. And when we see the mugshot of this awful creature, he looks like a demon. He looks evil. But instead of that, they chose to release a sort of angelic schoolboy. And then we had the same nonsense.
There it is, Mike. We're just looking. This is you're so right. We've discussed this a lot this week. Extraordinary that as it emerged that this was the guy that slaughtered those poor kids in the dance hall. This was the picture the police put out. An angelic 12-year-old. At the time, he was a 17-year-old monster. And in a minute, we'll show you the real picture of this guy. So why did they put the police put this there he really is? The reason the police put that picture of an angelic 12-year-old out there, in my view, is they somehow wanted us to think better of this guy because, you know, he's a boy of colour, his parents were immigrants. You know what I'm saying? It's this middle-class hand-wringing about protecting ethnic communities, you know, from racism and all that kind of stuff. It's pathetic.
I think it's stronger than that, Kevin. These people have almost got a religion, and their religion is multiculturalism, net zero, being part of the European Union. These are not policies to them. These are these are sacred rights that they believe in.
You're right.
When something comes along that challenges this, and what they can't have is that this is any way connected to Islam. So the fact he had an Al Qaeda handbook, you know, and the idea that the Prime Minister can say that the trial would somehow collapse if this was revealed, well, we knew what the motivation of IRA suspects were before they were appeared at court, and we knew the Prime Minister himself was condemning everybody involved in the disorder as far-right thugs before they ever got to trial. So I'm surprised no one has appealed on that, really, because if anything was going to influence the trial, it's the Prime Minister condemning people as some motivation before they ever got there. So the whole thing has challenged this liberal left religion of diversity and multiculturalism, and they've done everything in their power. They've used everything they can to conceal this, but the trouble is it just can't be concealed. It's so wicked, it's so awful. This is possibly one of the most dreadful crimes to ever happen in this country. I'm a crime historian, so I know all about Jack the Ripper, I know all about the Moors murderers, I know about the Yorkshire Ripper, I know about Fred West. But I don't think anybody, any criminal in this country has ever stabbed a child 100 times. It beggars belief. It beggars belief, Kevin. It's beyond belief, the wickedness of this crime. And when we talk about the death penalty and stuff, well, I was a soldier at 16, so if Labour thinks you're an adult at 16, then you can swing at 16. In my view,
I think we should be able to make exceptions for people like Rudy Kapana, you know. The police also colluded with the Prime Minister and the CPS because the Prime Minister was busy dismissing these rioters as people spreading misinformation about terrorism when he knew full well that it was him who was spreading misinformation by saying there was no connection to terrorism. He lied to the public, and for that he still needs to face the music, if you ask me. Now, look, you're a veteran copper, and I suppose I'll have to concede I'm a veteran journalist, although, you know, I think I'm very young looking. But I'm not very young. But here's the deal. You and I know how this legal system works. Now, when you were a copper, you arrested a terrible murderer that all the papers were fascinated with. Now, until you charged that murderer, you arrest him, right? Usually the charging process, well, it could take several days, but it would take at least 24 hours, usually 48, before they actually got to... Now, in those 48 hours, the journalists I mean, we tried to be responsible, of course, hand on heart we did. But we could not prejudice a trial because there wasn't a trial. There cannot be a trial until someone is charged. So what was the trial that Keir Starmer said he was going to prejudice? What was the trial that the police said, well, we can't tell you anything because we prejudiced the trial? There wasn't one. He hadn't been charged. Do you see what I mean? They were not operating within the confines of the law.
Absolutely. We only have to look back historically at the Yorkshire Ripper, and you all remember when he was arrested, there was a big press conference where it was announced who he was and what he did for a living, etc., etc. And this is not unusual. When Joe Cox was murdered, it was quickly triumphantly announced that this man was a right-wing thug, and his motivation and his name and where he came from. And we haven't seen what we've seen, quite the opposite. Yeah. With the Southport murder, that every attempt was made to conceal the truth. So he is not a Welsh choir boy. It's an utter nonsense. They're just hiding under really ridiculous rubbish, because the elephant in the room, of course, is this involved Islamic terrorism, Al-Qaeda, and this is the last thing a Labour government wanted, because in their mind, in their religious minds of this new religion, Islam is a victim. It is not an attacker.
Yeah.
And so what right-wing thugs are the wicked people.
They became the villains of the piece, the rioters. And let's make this clear. You often make this point, Mike, and you make it well. If the Southport dance hall murderer turned out to be a white right-wing Millwall supporter, let me tell you, we would have been given a whole slew of information about how terrible he was, what a terrorist he was, what an evil person he was. The picture that they released would have made him look terribly evil. And that, if you compare that to the way they treated this young man of colour, this young man of Rwandan immigrant parents, that, Mike, is called two-tier policing, two-tier justice.
And I've asked the police, I've sent a Freedom of Information Act request to say, who made the decision about the photograph? Because I've never known any other case where the mugshot has not been used. Because often these mugshots are used in a sense to ridicule people, aren't you? You see people in their worst, state. If it's a woman, they've got no makeup on. If they're a man, they look a complete mess because they've been in a cell for 24 hours. And it's really used to say, look at this evil scoundrel. Instead of that, we get his best wedding photograph or best school photograph. It is not good enough. I mean, people have compared it, of course, to Chris Cabot. This happy-go-lucky chap, smiling, lovely. What a lovely man he is. No, he wasn't. He was a gangster who killed people. But once again, we see this used. And until we recognise there's a problem with Islamic terrorism, with young black men being involved in gangs, with Asian, or not Asian, Muslim, Pakistani rape gang. Until we're honest and say these problems exist, until we say that, we cannot deal with them. But we're never going to deal with them in this way where the people see this multiculturalism as some kind of a religion, and they'll do everything in their power to protect that religious doctrine, and then the community suffers. It's really bad at the moment, Kevin.
I think it is a rancid rot at the heart of our society, is the way that the authorities, the police, politicians, social services, social workers, local politicians, councillors, everybody is terrified if the proponent of some terrible crime or some wrongdoing is either a person of colour or is somehow connected to Islamist terrorism, is a Muslim.
Children, if you think, Kevin, I was just saying, look at the children. You're going to go into Sarah Shahif, but also Victoria Columbier. These were children who were left to die because people were terrified of being accused of racism and intervening in this case. Yeah. And so this awful thing of racism, which was being whipped up by the left to divide us, to separate us, to cause trouble, to get them votes, until we can deal with that, People are going to die, and it's particularly wicked when it's children who are impacted on by this.
We're going to go to break in a minute, but I just want to make a final point. Pete Barnes, who's with me at the moment, we had a bit of a row earlier about sort of the definition of terrorism. Now, I don't know what you think, Mike. I respect Pete's view. He says we do have to have a proper legal definition, but I just think that if we go to somebody who's just, I don't know, for the sake of argument, just stabbed 3 little girls to death, tried to kill 8 more, and also tried to kill 2 adults, 2 brave adults who tried to protect those kids. By the way, what a couple of heroes they were.
Absolutely.
And then they go to his house and they find an Al-Qaeda manual and a load of ricin poison. The fact that legally that does not entitle our justice system, or indeed anyone apparently, to call him a terrorist is just bizarre. It's ridiculous.
Lunacy.
It
is lunacy. It's absolute lunacy. It's lunacy. If he'd gone and killed those girls and the wickedness of that crime, and we'd found nothing else, you'd think, is the man a psychopath? What's driving him? But the fact we'd found a terrorist manual, the fact he's got all this ricin poison, what does that tell us? And the other thing, of course, Kevin, by covering all this up, we never told the neighbours that there was ricin poison in their street, so they were prepared to put other people at risk to protect their multicultural wonder world, and it's just shocking.
Apparently their neighbour's cat died a horrible death, probably due to this ricin, so there was one terrible victim. But seriously, I mean, I just think it's bizarre. No terrorist connection. Al-Qaeda manual, I don't know, ricin poison, nothing to do with terrorism, nothing to do with Islam. By the way, the Al-Qaeda manual was written by a renowned Islamist extremist. Of course it was terrorism. Mike, stay where you are, and we'll discuss Sarah Sharif, another terribly treated little girl who died a terrible death. That next, stay tuned.
Well, it's a difficult one because, I mean, in the sense that it is quite technical. Obviously, no judge, I don't think, was ever going to let out this awful man for what he did. And so, therefore, it does become quite a technical issue. And I think a lot of the anger has been felt and swirling around. I'm not sure necessarily it's going to find its avenue in this, really. As you say, the Conservatives actually were the ones who, I think in 2020, introduced the current sentencing laws around for under 18s. This Axel Ruda has been given 52 years. It's unlikely he'll ever be let out of prison. I imagine there'd be a huge storm when there was.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We're still talking to former Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville. Mike, let's talk a little bit about another poor little girl, Sarah Sharif, who was about a month ago, wasn't it, when her fiend of a father and his partner both received life sentences for torturing that poor little girl. She was only 10 years old, to death, methodically, ruthlessly to death over a number of years. Now, outrageously, now this kid, just like Axel Rudikabana, her background was full of the most appalling failures by the authorities. So there were lots of bids to get that kid away from her father, who had a long reputation for violence, and yet, so 3 family court judges on separate occasions basically ruled that the kid should stay with the father. 1 family court judge said full custody to the father, despite his long reputation for violence. Now, when the sentence came down, the judge, Mr. Justice Williams, ruled that those 3 family court judges must not be named, cannot be named, because they would be slaughtered, crucified by the social media lynch mob, to which I say, so what? And secondly, outrageously, he said that they would also be treated unfairly by irresponsible journalists. So one judge tried to look after his 3 mates. Anyway, the Daily Mail, the BBC, a number of media organisations, quite rightly, went to the appeal court, and today it was ruled that these judges can be named for their disastrous mistakes. And they will be named next week. But, you know, what is a judge? What on earth does he think he's doing? You know, saying that newspapers could not be trusted to report the story responsibly. We must protect my mates from the social media lynch mob. This is typical of Britain, isn't it? The great and the good, the establishment looking after each other. The only good thing is that at the appeal court today, the appeal court judge, Sir Geoffrey Voss, said, in the circumstances of this case, the judge had no jurisdiction to anonymise the historic judges either on the 9th of December 2024 or thereafter. He was wrong to do so. Mr. Justice Williams needs to be hauled over the coals for this, doesn't he?
He absolutely does, and I congratulate Sir Geoffrey Voss on his decision, because what they were saying is that the reason that Mr. Justice Williams refuses, they might be subject to inflammatory comments. Well, that's really wounding and quite sad. And what you've got to compare this is the establishment, again, the hierarchy, the 2-tier Britain protecting themselves. And let's compare this with Sergeant Blake, who was charged with the murder of Chris Cabba, who appealed to be made anonymous, and it was ruled by the judge, Lucraft is his name, Mr. Justice Lucraft, that there was no evidence of any immediate risk to the good sergeant or his family. And of course his name was released, and then suddenly thereafter there was a £10,000 contract put out on his life, and the poor officer and all his family have had to go into hiding. The only difference here is the sergeant is one of us. He is one of the plebs. He is not one of the gang. He is not one of the liberal left establishment who do these things. And too often these judges make these stupid decisions, whether it's allowing a child to be left with some wicked father, or releasing a sex offender on bail, or releasing a rapist on parole, and then these people do it. And they never have to face the consequences. They release them to some council estate, which is nowhere near where they live, and they never punished when they commit acts. And so naming these people, they deserve a lot more than inflammatory comments. They deserve a well, they deserve to be punished in some way for the stupidity of their decision.
Yeah, they made terrible, terrible decisions and essentially enabled this awful father and his partner to just carry on torturing that poor little girl and eventually killing her. And for that, their name should be up in lights. I mean, you know, justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. A judge going against that sacred principle is frankly, I mean, it's obviously catastrophically wrong, but it's bizarre. And how dare he turn round and attack the freedom of the press and just say, journalists can't be trusted to be responsible. Well, that might be your private opinion, but you better not bring that into a court of law.
And I've no doubts as well, Kevin, that what also impacted on this was this idea of racism. If we are three white judges, if we interfere in this Muslim family's lifestyle, we'll be criticised. And so once again, this awful thing, this racism thing that has been utterly whipped up to divide us all, has again impacted and caused the death of a child, I would say.
It's got to stop, hasn't it? It's got to stop. Mike, excellent to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Mike Neville there, former Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. I wish there were a few more like him today. I really do. So with Pete Barnes, we're going to go to break now. And after the break, the rest of the show is all of yours because we're going to go up to 9 o'clock. Regular viewers and listeners to the Friday system will know what I'm talking about. At 9 o'clock, we're going to get my TV show, What Just Happened. Now, that goes on from 9 until 10 o'clock, so that's all in the can, ready for your entertainment. And let me assure you, it is absolutely impeccable entertainment. No, it's a good one tonight, so do watch it and enjoy it. And if you don't watch it on screen, if you don't watch it on the telly, you just want to listen to it on the radio, it's very radio friendly. So that's at 9 o'clock. What Just Happened? Do watch it. That's an order. Right, we're going to break now. We'll take your calls after these messages.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. By the way, I told you about my show, What Just Happened. Lots of information to come for you. If you don't get to watch it tonight, but I told you I'm ordering you to watch it, but if you disobey my orders, which you're perfectly entitled to do, it will be on YouTube tomorrow morning as of about 9:30, so you can watch it anytime you like after that. So can't say fairer than that. Also, you lucky people, you can watch me tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. I am on Clash of the Titans with Jeremy Kyle, Mike Graham and Julia Hartley-Brewer as we thrash around some of the big stories of the week. You don't want to miss that. 7:30, Clash of the Titans. So that's it. I'm probably on something else at the weekend. I think I am, actually, called Grumpy Old Men. I think that comes out Sunday night. So if I was you, I'd all go on holiday. I'll get out of the country, otherwise you'll have to watch me all weekend. Right, seriously, let's go straight to the phones. Before we go to the phones, let's quickly play. We've got a voice note from Rob. So take it away, Rob.
This is Rob from Milton Keynes. I'd just like to say that during the murder of the Bulger boys, the Home Secretary, Jack Straw, lowered the age of criminal responsibility. I believe it was from 12 to 10. So why is that not something that they could do in this case with the Southport case?
Yeah, Rob's making a good point. As I was saying earlier, Pete, what I can't understand, Paul in Liverpool, with you in just a second, what I can't understand is why they made a special dispensation to name him after his arrest, even though he was under 18. So they were able to change the law or bend the rules then. Yeah. But when it came to sentencing him, they couldn't.
Yeah, I have a feeling that it's to do with the difference between like a kind of, this is the guidance and this is an act of Parliament. I presume that is how they managed to get around it. But I do agree with you. There is a lot of contradictions here. And this is why they're going to having this big inquiry. But one of the main things that...
But it's an act of Parliament that protects under 18s from being named as well.
But I presume there might be something in it that does allow them to do it. There has to be.
I don't think it's that.
But it will be interesting to find out the reason. I don't want to give a reason as with any kind of certainty, but I do agree with you. There are a lot of questions to ask why this and not that. There is no consistency, and that is really, really concerning, particularly around cases like this that attract huge amounts of attention and are so important that we get right.
Judges should be allowed to make exceptions. You know, they wouldn't be irresponsible about this. You know, the guy was about 17, about 5 or 6 days off his 18th birthday when he did this, and a lot of people think that was deliberate.
Yes, I agree with you 100. But one thing I will say is that we treat our judiciary with kid gloves and with white gloves. We bow to them. And
we didn't just now, did we?
No, but this is interesting how that has slowly changed since probably the Brexit years, I would say. We're starting to see the judiciary come under absolute criticism, it is about time.
Do you know what's weird about that? Do you know what's weird about that? Because I go back a while, Fleet Street, back when I first got there in the 80s and that, judges were our playthings. We used to kick them around from one end of the football field to the other, always taking the mickey out of them. And then we sort of dropped all that, and we've been in a state of sort of
deference, really.
Revered deference ever since. And we shouldn't, you know. Most of them aren't very good.
No.
I mean, I've seen them I've done lots and lots of court cases. They're full of themselves, they're pompous, and as in the case of Mr. Justice Williams, they can very often be disastrously, stupidly wrong. So no more looking up to judges, folks. Look down on them. It's funny. Right.
It is,
just for a laugh. Let's go to Paul in Liverpool. Hi, Paul.
Yeah, hi, Kev. Just about the death penalty for that guy. I mean, for me, all I ever hear, and your guest is included there, I'm sure he's a nice fella, by the way, but it's always these sort of middle-class, upper-class, posh people who say no to the death penalty. But yet these people never live in areas where people are getting shot, stabbed, attacked, robbed. And this is... You know, this is a reality. I mean, just ask your guest, when was the last time he had a home invasion and they threw him against the wall with a sword?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point. Do you live in a tough part of Liverpool, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, you know, but I mean, we see it all the kids anymore. 12-year-olds will kill you at the drop of a hat. It's something's gone wrong. The level of anger and aggression is beyond belief. I actually even say to my friends, where did it come from? Where does this
I know, you're absolutely right. Something is going, something is sick at heart in this country at the moment. But my point, Paul, is that, you know, just to have the death penalty does not turn Britain into an uncivilized, savage country.
No.
We're not going to put 10 people a week to death. It will be in absolutely exceptional circumstances. And frankly, this was the crime of a generation, the crime of a lifetime that we witnessed, that we endured in Southport. This was an extraordinary crime, and I just think we should have had the option of execution.
Absolutely. This is a one-off. It's even just sinking in now how bad this was. Do you know what I mean? It's not. It's like
it's sinking in, Paul. It's sinking in, mate, because you know obviously we've got the details as he was being sentenced. Stay where you are, Paul. I'm with Pete Barnes. He's an opponent of the death penalty. Paul's making the point that, and I think it's a very good point. You know, that it tends to be middle class and upper class people who are against the death penalty, and working class people not so much. Is there a sort of class divide in the people who want executions and the people who don't? I think it's a good point.
I think it's an interesting question, and I'd probably look into it when after this, to be honest, just to look at the numbers. But for me, there's just no logical point to it, because we've just argued that judges are terrible, that they misuse power, that they're not very bright, yet you'd want to give them the ultimate power of the right to kill you. I really don't understand the mental gymnastics that you need there. But most importantly, it's not a deterrent. If you look at the United States, they still have these incidents in states where there is the death penalty. It is not a deterrent.
Punishment, though, isn't it?
It is a punishment, but what do you want? Justice or revenge?
Look,
this is the point. Is it justice or is it revenge?
This whole concept that punishments, that legal punishments are a deterrent, are kind of moribund, if you ask me. You know, criminals, they know that they'll get banged up if they do bad things. Doesn't stop them, never did, never will. The death penalty won't stop people killing people, never did, never will. So the idea...
Well, it'll get rid of them.
Yeah, but I know. I don't think it's about deterrent. No. I just think it's about the state, the British state, the justice system saying your crime is so terrible that we're going to take your life away. It's a punishment more than a deterrent.
I think you're sorry, Paul, but I think on this one, I think whilst we say it's an exceptional case, well, the next one won't be as exceptional, and it won't be. And as with every single thing that we have, it will be watered down.
Fine by me.
Well, then unfortunately,
fine by you, Paul.
I just don't see it,
and
I don't think it is Britain. I really don't think it is.
Of course, it's Britain.
Not at all.
For most of Britain's history, only very, very recently, Paul, have we not had the death penalty. Of course, it's Britain. You support it, though, Paul, yeah?
Yeah, for things like this, absolutely. I mean, let me just ask your guest one question there. If anyone killed his daughter and stabbed him 120 times, your 5-year-old, would you want him alive or dead?
Of course you'd want him dead, but it's the reason that we don't let the families of victims of crime to decide the punishment, because what you're after is revenge. You're not after justice.
You're after revenge.
No, that is not a civilized society. That is a brutal one.
I'm after revenge.
Because when that revenge turns on you,
honestly,
you'll want different treatment. That is the point.
Here it is, the voice of the middle class salon. Don't give me that rubbish about civilization. Yeah. Thanks for calling, mate, and do call again. I've got to move on because I've got to take some other calls, as you'd appreciate. Really good to talk to you, and you and I are on the same side. Let's go to Rotherham and talk to John. Hello, John.
Hi, Kev. How are you doing?
I'm all right. What's your stance on the death penalty?
Well, to be honest, I'm almost thinking that it'd actually be too good for him. Because if you think about where he's going in a prison with probably 99% of that population will want to harm him every single day.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry to John, I was saying...
for 52 years.
Yeah, I was saying, and I don't revel in this, I don't condone this.
No.
But if that guy, Axel Rudikabana, is still alive in a year's time, I'll be kind of surprised. Would you?
Yeah, same here. I will, absolutely, because he will have 99% of that prison population after his... Well,
I mean, he's going to get prison justice, isn't he?
He is, definitely, yeah. And that actually could be, 52 years every single day. Yeah. Of him really, really, really being scared to death of his, that might be a bit worse than him actually. Actually not being here probably might be the easy option for him.
Yeah.
He's going to get justice.
I mean, I think Pete Barnes is with me now. He's accusing me of having base instinct. But I mean, am I alone? I mean, I wouldn't mind 20 minutes in a room with Axel Rudikabana, would you? Because he's a little guy. He's very brave when he's up against little 6-year-old girls. I'll have a go at him, though, wouldn't you, John?
You and a lot of people, Kev. Yeah,
really. I mean, a lot has been made of this. He went to an event that he knew not only that would be full of little girls but females. He is a little coward who attacked females. He wouldn't dare go and do it at a football match or a pub where blokes would kick the living daylights out of him. So he's a coward, but he's going to find out about getting the living daylights kicked out of him behind bars, and I think it'll be worse than that. And who will shed a tear when he gets taught a lesson or two behind bars? John, with you all the way, mate. Good call. Thank you very much. Call me again. Shall we take we've got a voice note, have we here? Shall we take one? This is Rachel. Rachel, voice note from Rachel. Take it away, Rachel.
I disagree with people ringing in saying that the Southport killer will have a hard time in prison. As disappointing as it is, he'll be on a special unit surrounded by people like himself, paedophiles, rapists, child murderers, child abusers, and I don't think they're going to bat an eyelid at what he's done. I mean, best case really is Ian Brady. I mean, he died comfortable in a hospital bed at the age of 79. So sorry to disappoint everybody, but he won't get a hard time. He'll just go to prison and be looked after.
Well, Rachel, here's the deal. 52 years, that's a lot of opportunities to get at him. Trust me, he's going to have a hard time. Did you notice, by the way, Pete, that the father of Sarah Sharif, I mean, it took all of 2 weeks before he was slashed with a tuna tin, I seem to remember. So, don't worry about that. They'll if they want to get at him, they'll get at him. And I wouldn't want to impugn the way that prison officers operate, but, they perhaps might not be that vigilant in trying to protect Axel Rudikabana. I certainly hope they're not. Let's go to who we got? Andy in Hull. Hello, Andy.
Hey, Kev. How are you doing?
I'm all right, mate. What would you like to say?
Well, a couple of things. As much as I sometimes agree with, I like Pete and agree with him this time.
I like him as well. I don't know why.
So a lot of people say that.
This talk about the death sentence, I definitely agree in these circumstances. Same as Ian Huntley, them sort of people.
Yeah.
People cost to the country. It must be 4 or 5 years ago now. Somebody told me it was costing us £1 million a year to keep Ian Huntley in prison.
I'm not sure it's that. I mean, it will cost, because he was in a sort of psychiatric unit, wasn't he, which maybe costs more. It costs to keep the average prisoner in jail £51,000 a year. Rudikabana, I think, will cost probably considerably more than that.
Probably, yeah.
Because he'll need special security and all that. But let's hope that security is not too severe.
Right. So that's that. But let's move on from there.
Yeah.
We've learned today that now his family is in hiding now, and we're keeping his family. So his family is from Rwanda, so they've obviously dual nationality. So the first thing we should do now is deport his family back to Rwanda.
Why?
I mean, you know, I don't know. I'm conflicted about their parents. People say, well, you know, people say that the police let them down, the authorities let them down, social services, Prevent let them down. Yeah, they all did. And then they go, what about the parents? Well, you know, I'm not sure about Mr. and Mrs. Ruda-Cabana, but obviously there's a lot of documentation that they were constantly calling the police, trying to get him not to go to school because he was going in with a knife. I mean, there's evidence they tried their best. They did keep alerting the authorities, and the authorities did nothing. But what I think we have to take on board, Andy, is you can't just go, what about the parents? Some parents are just useless. You know, that old story, you need a license to go fishing, but you don't need a license to have kids.
No, exactly, yeah. He should have known. I mean, if my son had racing in his bedroom, I think I would know.
That's because you're a good parent, you see what I mean? I think we all have questions about Axel Ruda-Cabana's parents, but they did alert the authorities many times and were consistently ignored. That said, you know, when you hear stories of his father saying, oh, don't go in that taxi, please don't go to school, son, and all that, because you've got a knife, and then he did, you sort of think, well, you're his dad.
Yeah.
Crack the whip, you know? Crack the whip.
I couldn't agree more. It's an interesting one with the parents. Like you said, your basic instinct is always like, how did the parents know? But then I suppose, again, we're going to have to unpack all of this and find out what's happening. But, yeah, I have to admit, I'm not in favour of deporting them. We don't do sins of the father on the child, so why do we do the sins of the child on the father? Like, I just think it's that just... Yeah. I mean, extra misery upon misery.
The fact, Andy, that they did constantly call the police,
I think that's
constantly
really
called the authorities.
If they did nothing,
and
then...
the school, they didn't do nothing. I think they were weak with him.
They were
weak with him, but they don't sound to me to be the worst people in the world. But we don't know yet. But Andy, it's a good point, and thank you very much for your call, Andy in Hull there. So we've been to Hull and back. So now let's go to break, and we'll be back in a minute.
For 5 years after the death penalty was abolished in 1965, and in that period, the capital murder rate went up 125%. The incidence of criminals taking firearms on robberies went up something like, I think, 40%. There was a huge rise that proved conclusively that it had been a deterrent.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. In about 10 minutes, my show, What Just Happened, comes on. As I say, you can either watch it or you can listen to it. I highly recommend it. But at 10 o'clock, Andre Walker will be joining you or taking you through till 1 a.m. Sadly, James Whale can't be with you tonight. He's not feeling too well, as you can understand. But don't you worry, he'll be back. He is a miracle. But tonight it's Andre Walker, so that's at 10 o'clock after my show at 9 o'clock. Let's go back to the phones. Let's talk to Barry in Bournemouth. Hello, Barry.
Hiya, Karen. How you doing?
I'm all right.
I want to talk to you about the definition. You know,
the definition of terrorism, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So the moment it came on, I went onto the media and looked on Google on the dictionary.
Yeah.
This could be interesting to settle this little argument you got with your little friend there.
Yeah. He's no friend of mine.
Yeah.
He's a lefty.
No. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah. I got the definition. I'll just read it quickly to you.
Yeah. Go on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready. We're ready. We're all ears.
Okay. Terrorism is when people use violence to scare others and force them to do what they want. It usually targets innocent people. Terrorism causes harm, loss of life and fear in society.
Yeah. Do you know what, Barry? It's the thing is, Pete, that used to be the definition.
Used to be.
The definition of terrorism was any act that caused terror.
Yeah.
So if I run into a shop swinging a gun around and 100 people are terrified, that's terrorism. But we've imposed this new legal definition that it must somehow or other have a connection to some kind of religious ideology.
Religious or kind of ideological.
What's the point of that?
Because what it is to show that this is motivated for a particular end.
But why?
And because terrorism is about reforming society. They have a vision of what they want to happen, and it's about terrorising for that end. And this is why it's different.
Well, why can't we make it? Well, Barry, let me ask you. And this is a question for Pete as well. My view would be, why can't we just decide on a case-to-case basis? You know, take a look at Rudy Cabana, and I would say you got an Al Qaeda manual, you got a load of ricin poison, therefore you clearly are intent on terrorism, on causing terror. Why can't we just do it case by case instead of having this blanket rule? And if you don't qualify, if you don't make the grade because it's not some kind of religious ideology, you're not a terrorist. I mean, you know, a guy with all this ricin poison and Al Qaeda manual and enough weapons to supply an army, that's a terrorist, if you ask me. Wouldn't you agree, Barry?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just to follow on to that paragraph that I just read you, and I take your point, it says that it usually targets innocent people to make a point or to reach political or religious goals.
Yeah, well,
that's the point.
But you know, I mean, when you're guys talking about, you know, what
the key phrase there, Barry and Pete, is usually.
Well, this is the difference. This is
Can't
when
be always.
Well, this
Why
is
should
why
it
we
be
have
always?
the legal definition of it, because it is about elevating terrorism to show that it is a unique, specific kind of crime.
Why?
And that it must
Why?
Because it then is given different sentencing guidelines and sentencing parameters.
What do you mean we go easier on them, like we did Axel Rudy Cabana?
Well, we shouldn't, and this is why we should have a huge review of our sentencing guidelines right across the board. But why we separate terrorism out is it is used to terrorise the public to force a certain type of change. And it is about recognising that motivator and knowing that we'd have to tackle the motivation behind the crime, not just tackle the crime. Yeah, and it's why we have to be so careful when we call things terrorism, because this kind of blanket phrase.
Why?
Because we have to learn that the motivation.
Be careful with the language you use.
Language we do on this.
You know where you can stick that, don't you?
Yeah, but
where the sun don't shine. Yeah, Barry, Pete's talking rubbish, but you weren't. Thank you very much for your call, mate. Call me again. It's Barry in Bournemouth, and probably the last call. It's our friend of the show, Mark in Lincolnshire. Hi, Mark. Death penalty.
Death penalty indeed, and higher peace as well. Yeah, basically what it is, quickly, I wanted to really quickly go on that last point as well. Death penalty, we should bring it in, and from a Christian point of view, it's perfectly acceptable. You know, where there's no argument of the guilt of a person, and the crime is so heinous as to not really seem appropriate for man to cast proper judgment on, then it's perfectly acceptable to expedite a person's journey to, you know, their final judgment, shall we say. So, from a Christian point of view, I have no issue with it. I think it should be limited. I think it.
Oh, absolutely. I think
crimes like this.
Yeah, look, we've just witnessed a very rare circumstance where, I mean, even opponents of the death penalty like Pete would accept that those of us who think maybe this is worth execution. I mean, you wouldn't say that we were making the most outrageous point in the world.
Not at all.
Now, here's my point, Mark. You know, I think that opponents of the death penalty, or the argument against the death penalty, kind of, to some extent, revolves around the methods that we use to execute people. So I don't see why the death penalty has to involve the grim spectacle of a noose and somebody swinging from the gallows, or over in America, you know, the electric chairs, smoke comes out of their ears. By the way, the electric chair can take 2 hours to kill people. I mean, it's a hell of a spectacle, an awful thing. And the lethal injection that they have over there, you know, that can take like hours, apparently. Apparently they writhe in agony. Now, Mark, I made this point, perhaps it's shallow, I don't know, but, you know, I've had dogs all my life. I've had the sad task to take several dogs throughout my life to the vet and have them put down. And they put this sort of catheter thing in their leg and they squeeze it in and they just gently, peacefully pass away. Why can't we do that for our death penalty? I mean, wouldn't that, Pete, sort of, to some extent, appease people who oppose the death penalty?
Maybe to a degree, but I think you have to look at the motivation. We do this to animals as an act of mercy.
But it's not about them. I'm saying
that there is an argument here that I completely appreciate it.
So you're saying that the spectacle is part of the punishment?
I think it is.
I'm saying to prove, you know, I'm still at heart some sort of middle class softy. I'm saying take the grim spectacle away. Just put them slowly and quietly to death.
Yeah, I see your argument, but again, you've still given the ultimate power to the state. That we've literally sat here for the last 2 hours and said it's utterly incompetent and corrupt and all the rest of it. Please, by all means, have the right to kill me if I've ever found guilty.
I don't like the theatre.
I don't like it at all either. But there's another argument here, and this is to do with very limited cases. The same people have been making the argument, say, about assisted dying. Well, a limited case will expand. You can make the same argument when it comes to this. This is my point, is that whilst things start off with a very relatively small idea, they grow and they get bigger and bigger because you have opened the door. The problem you have when you open the death penalty door is you cannot shut that door again. It is incredibly difficult to do. And
we wouldn't want to shut it.
Well, eventually, who knows? Well, I think they said that when they put it in the death
of opening the door.
Well, they've said that, and then we closed it. Didn't we?
Yeah, but
so this is the point. It takes how many years? God knows how many cases of that this could impact. I understand people's instincts here, and I really, really think that this guy should be put to death. But again, we have to think about this long term. Think about the consequences and what it means for our society.
Well, Mark, what do you think the consequences would be? I think the consequences would be that we would look like a tougher society, a society that doesn't take it when people commit the kind of crimes that Ruda Cabana committed, that we, the British state, the British justice system, can, if it wants to, impose the ultimate punishment. It makes us look tougher on crime, if you ask me.
I mean, to be honest, if I was going down that route for it, I'd be looking at the old traditional length of rope and a short drop, to be honest.
Well, you see, I'm not sure about that, but anyway,
Before I go, can I quickly interject on your little discussion you two have been having this evening about the terror thing? Islamism. I think you're off the mark a bit, Kev. With
how dare you?
Yes, thank you, Mark.
No, in the
it's my show. I'm not having this. Bye, Mark. Thanks. So go on. Quick.